Hello all. I realized that I violated one of my own rules in my previous Doctor Who episode uh, review. I went on for far too long, and I meant these always to be short. So I'm just going to do an overview. I'm not going to, review every single Doctor and every single companion and give you every single story, which would take hours and hours and hours. And I think again, I got some facts wrong, I got some dates wrong, I got some stories incorrect. So I'm going to start over. I'm just going to do a brief overview of the show. And for those of you who are not familiar, Doctor Who is the longest running television science fiction series ever. And it was created by the BBC, created by, I should say, Donald Wilson, Sidney Newman, and C.E. Weber. And it was first broadcast on the rather unfortunate date of November 23rd, 1963, the day after the John F. Kennedy assassination. Needless to say, most people were watching the news that day, not science fiction programs. But it starred William Hartnell as a character called the Doctor, Carol Ann Ford as Susan, his granddaughter, William Russell as Ian Chesterton, one of his school teachers, and Jacqueline Hill as Barbara Wright, her other school teacher. They become concerned because they don't know where she lives, and they follow her to what they think is her home, and she actually goes into a junkyard. And inside the junkyard, there's this old police telephone emergency call box. And she walks inside it, and they're like, what the heck? They go inside and find that it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, because it's not actually a police call box. It's a device called a TARDIS, and that stands for Time and Relative Dimension in Space. And when you walk inside, you're actually in a different dimension than you are outside. The Doctor is a time traveler, and he's not human. He has two hearts, and they later reveal, they didn't say this in the first series, that he's a being called the Time Lord, and he's from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation of Kasterborous. And this was an interesting thing they did. William Hartnell was very elderly when he made the series, and as the second series wound on, he started becoming ill. And they thought, what are we going to do? We're going to have to cancel the show. Well, the writers came up with a way around that. The Time Lords, when they become old or when worn out, they can regenerate into a completely different body and a different personality, but still has the same memories as the original Time Lord. The first series did not do terribly well. It was called The Tribe of Gum. It was about cavemen. And they decided they were going to cancel it. Fortunately, they'd already filmed the second series, which was called The Daleks. It was written by Terry Nation. It was about a planet called Skaro, where there had been a nuclear war, and the survivors were the Thals, who were human and very peaceful, and the Daleks, who were creatures who were so badly mutated that they had to go into these sort of metallic travel machines. They have no human features whatsoever, no legs, no arms. They only have an eye on a stalk and two lights and a plunger sort of for an arm, and another one that's a weapon. And they speak in these kind of mechanical sounding voices, and their favorite thing to say is exterminate. And Verity Lambert, the producer, was told the show was going to be canceled, and she's riding to the BBC Centre on the bus, and she saw every little school kid the day after the first episode aired going, exterminate, exterminate. She knew they had a hit, and she told the people at the BBC about this, and they said, okay, we'll give you a little bit longer. And fortunately for us, it's still going after all these years. William Hartnell had a number of great episodes. He met the Cybermen in the 10th Planet, who were these beings who were half human, half machine. He met he met the meddling monk, who was another Time Lord, who was, as it implies, a meddler. He met the Celestial Toy Maker, who was an evil, very powerful being. And they went to see Marco Polo, they went to the French Revolution, they went to see the Romans, they went to see ancient Egypt, they encountered the Vikings, had a lot of historical information in adventures, because it was supposed to be somewhat educational for children as well, though children said they were so frightened they used to hide behind the couch when it came on. I can't vouch for that. I didn't live in England at the time. But anyway, William Hartnell got sick, and so he was replaced by Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor. Patrick Troughton was a much more bouncy, bubbly kind of character. He was quirky. He played the flute. He had kind of a Beatles haircut and wore a different jacket, and was very amusing. And he had eventually different companions. One was named Jamie, was played by Fraser Hines, and one was played by Zoe. named Zoe, and she was from the future. Jamie was a Scots Highlander, and they go through a series of adventures. Finally, his last adventure was called The War Games, and that's when we first hear the term Time Lord. They put him through this series of tests, and Polly and Jamie ask him, "Who's doing this? You know, who's putting you through these things?" And he says, "It's my own people, the Time Lords," and they say that he's basically violated their laws because he interferes with people. Time Lords are not supposed to interfere with events. They're just supposed to observe. The Doctor constantly interferes, so he's obviously violating their laws, and they force him to regenerate into the third Doctor, played by Jon Pertwee. He played him as a very debonair, and he's condemned to stay on Earth. His TARDIS is sort of locked, so he can't go other places. Now he becomes the chief scientific advisor for this organization called UNIT, which is the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, sort of a paramilitary force that investigates supernatural phenomena. And they work with this guy, Alistair Lethbridge-Stewart, played by Nicholas Briggs, and who also did and continues to do a lot of Dalek voices as well. And they had some great episodes: Carnival of Monsters and Planet of the Spiders, Death to the Daleks, and some really good episodes. And then Pertwee got tired of it as well, and he handed the role over to Tom Baker. Tom Baker was the first Doctor I became aware of when I saw his series in the 1970s. He was a much more funny kind of character. He wore this really long scarf and behaved very eccentrically. I love one of his companions, Romana, said to him in one episode, "Doctor, you're being childish." He says, "Of course I am. There's no point in being an adult if you can't be childish sometimes." That was great. That's a summation of the way his Doctor was. He played for quite a long time. He did, I believe, 6 or 7 seasons. 7, I believe, seasons of the Doctor. Did some terrific stories. The Pyramids of Mars, I remember, being great, and Hand of Fear. And he had some great companions, the Talons of Weng-Chiang, and Horror of Fang Rock, and a lot of other great, The Invasion of Time, which was a great episode. And he had some great companions too. Sarah Jane Smith, who had started with the third Doctor, played by Elizabeth Sladen, the late Elizabeth Sladen. He also had Leela, played by Louise Jameson, and the two different Romanas. Romana was also a Time Lord. Her real name was Romana Travatralundar. And he said, "You can either be Romana or Fred." And, so he started calling her Romana. First played by Mary Tamm, and then she was also played by Lalla Ward after Mary Tamm left. He and Lalla Ward were married briefly. Then eventually the Doctor, he got tired of it as well. They wrote him out on an episode called Logopolis, where by that time he had acquired difference. Romana had left. He left her in a different dimension called E-Space. And he, along with his robot dog, K9. And then he took on a couple of the new companions. Tegan Jovanka, played by Janet Fielding, who was an airline hostess who got kind of trapped on the TARDIS. And Sarah Sutton, who is called Nyssa of Traken. And she was in a really good adventure with his old enemy. The Master was also a Time Lord, but he's evil. And then Adric, who was played by Matthew Waterhouse, was kind of a boy genius. A lot of people didn't really like his character. I thought he was okay. I mean, he did become annoying eventually, but because he would always solve all their problems, and that kind of becomes boring. He regenerated after Logopolis into the 5th Doctor, Peter Davison, who's the only one who I've met. A terrific guy and also a great singer. He did some great episodes, Castrovalvo, where he goes through a regenerative crisis and he finds out that he's being manipulated by the Master. He did a Cyberman episode. He did a Dalek episode. And finally, in Caves of Androzani, he meets a new companion. All the companions kind of got tired of him and left, except Adric. Adric, unfortunately, died. In Earthshock, he is fighting off the Cybermen on a spaceship, and he's captured on a shuttle. And it turns out that his shuttle is what caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. So the Doctor can't reverse that. It's a fixed point in time. Tegan leaves after the Dalek episode because she says she'd seen too much violence. Nyssa left a short while after, wanted to go back to E-Space as well. And then he got a new companion, Perry, played by the gorgeous Nicola Bryant, in Caves of Androzani, which was his last episode. and he wore a cricketer's outfit, but he had a stalk of celery. And we always wondered, why do you wear a stalk of celery? Was that just being eccentric? Well, it turns out there's a reason. They are poisoned by these bats with something called spectrox toxemia, and he eats the celery as a way to fight off the spectrox toxemia. I thought that was interesting. Unfortunately, he comes up with a cure for her, but there's only enough for her and not for him. And the celery didn't cure him completely. So he regenerates into Colin Baker, who was not everybody's favorite. He was kind of irascible and mean. And he wore this terrific jacket that's kind of like the Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's all kinds of different colors. It had a white cat on one epaulette and a black cat on the other epaulette, and lots of question marks in reference to the show's title. He had some good episodes, The Twin Dilemma and Revelation of the Daleks, which I thought was really good, and some scenery chewing in that one as well. But finally, he got tired of it too, and he regenerates into Sylvester McCoy, who was a great comedian. He's very funny, and he used to make his living by shoving ferrets down his pants. That's great. And he had a vest that had question marks all over it, and he had a question mark umbrella. And he had a couple of great companions. The first one was Melanie, played by Bonnie Langford. And then later on, when she left in a episode called Dragonfire, where she met this kind of pirate guy named Sevalom Glitz, and decided she was going to reform his character, so she decides to stay with him and travel the universe. And he adopts this girl, Ace, who was in that episode as well, played by Sophie Aldred. And she's great. She's this kind of kick-ass character who's always carrying around this explosive called Nitro 9. And the doctor says things like, Ace, give me some of that Nitro 9 you're not carrying. And she blows things up with it. They had one of the best episodes called The Remembrance of the Daleks, which is all about a very strange Time Lord device called The Hand of Omega. And I won't spoil that for you if you haven't seen it. You should. Written by Ben Aronovich. He eventually, at the end of his run, he did a final episode called Survival, which again is about the Master and these strange characters called the Cheetah People, and beings called Kitlings, which hunt people to bring to another dimension so the Cheetah People can hunt them down. They canceled the show, and they had to put in a quick, final scene, which the Doctor and Ace are just walking off into the sunset. And it wasn't revived until 1996. They did a television movie, partly produced by the Americans, starring Paul McGann as the Eighth Doctor, and his companion was Daphne Ashbrook, and the Master was played by Eric Roberts, who I thought did a really good job. It was a good episode. It was interesting, but it did not garner the attention that the BBC hoped, and they did not renew the series at the time. But they did in 2005, under the tutelage of Russell T Davies, who brought in Christopher Eccleston to play the Ninth Doctor, and he agreed only to do one season. He had a new companion, Rose Tyler, played by Billie Piper, who I thought did a terrific job, and really got into the character a lot. She had a boyfriend named Mickey, and I'm sorry I forget that actor's name. And her mom was played by the beautiful Camille Kaduri, who was a page 3 girl, really very sexy and funny. And they did a lot of great episodes, and it's in one of the episodes, I don't remember which one, the Ninth Doctor reveals that there had been something called the quote-unquote Great and Final Time War, which was a war between the Daleks and the Time Lords. The Daleks were angry about certain events that had taken place in the episode Genesis of the Daleks, where the Fourth Doctor tried to avert the Daleks' creation. And they declared all-out war, and basically both sides were wiped out, and the Doctor says it's his fault, that we don't understand why. Then he left, and David Tennant came on as the 10th Doctor. He's one of the most beloved. He stayed for quite a long time. And they introduced some great enemies like the Weeping Angels, who, if you blink at them, they can move, but as long as you don't blink, they can't move. But if they catch you, what they do is they don't kill people, they send them back in time. Like, they sent this girl back to the 1800s, and she lives her life in the 1800s, but she can't get back to her own time. They introduced the Ood, or these weird kind of octopus squid creatures, but they have beautiful singing voices. And they introduced a lot of, had a lot of really great episodes. Then again, Tennant finally decided he'd had enough. He wanted to do something else. And Matt Smith who is currently on the Game of Thrones sequel, House of the Dragon, as Daemon Targaryen, came in as the 11th Doctor. I loved him. He was completely eccentric. He ate fish finger and custard. He had a great companion called Amy Pond, who was played by the gorgeous Karen Gillan, who's been in some of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies as Nebula. And he had a pretty good run, and eventually he, again, became kind of tired of the role and passed it on to Peter Capaldi, who had been a fan of the show and actually got a fan letter published in a Doctor Who magazine, and now he was playing the Doctor, which I think is a great story. A lot of people didn't like him at first because he was kind of this tetchy old Scotsman, and he was kind of gruff, didn't treat his companions very well, but he eventually grew on people, and myself included. I love there's a scene in one of the episodes where he's riding in on a T-72 tank, and he's playing an electric guitar and he doesn't have a sonic screwdriver now, he's got sonic sunglasses, and he was actually playing the electric guitar in that episode. And then he went through for, I believe, 2 or 3 episodes, including the 50th anniversary special called The Day of the Doctor, which was very good and explains about the final Time War and how the Doctor was about to activate something called the Moment, but the Time Lords all figured out a way to prevent what happened in the Time War from happening. The Daleks had actually won, and they actually managed to find a way to reverse that. Again, I won't spoil that if you guys haven't seen it. Then Peter Capaldi, again, got a bit tired of it, and the first female Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, came on under the guidance of showrunner Trish Chibnall, who had written Blink, the first Weeping Angel story, and some other good stories. Unfortunately, there were kind of a lot of weak plots, and it was interesting. I mean, I kind of liked her. I liked the way she portrayed the character. She doesn't call her traveling people companions. She calls them mates, meaning friends in British. And I think she did a decent job with it. They just gave her some really kind of crappy stories like Arachnids in the UK, which I'm an arachnophobe, so I hated that episode instantly. But there was also some kind of interesting kind of ghost stories. They didn't want to use traditional enemies, but eventually they had to bring in the Master. They had to bring in the Cybermen. And they did in The Power of the Daleks, which was her final episode. And he was great, the Sacha Dhawan as the Master, because he steals one of the Doctor's regenerations and turns into the Doctor, but he's doing it satirically. And he's got Patrick Troughton's recorder, he's got Tom Baker's scarf, he's got one of Colin Baker's cats on his jacket, and I think he's got the 7th Doctor's umbrella too, and he's being very funny in the role. And then at the end of that, she defeats the Master, of course, and the Cybermen are plotting against her, and regenerates remarkably back into David Tennant. And he's going, what? How did this, he doesn't know how he regenerated into the same body. That's explained in the 60th anniversary specials. And in the last of the specials, he, quote unquote, by generous, he's re-met Mel and Ace. And he asked them, would each of you pull on one of my arms? And they do. And he generates back into himself, the 14th Doctor, and the 15th Doctor, played by Ncuti Gatwa. And together they defeat the Celestial Toymaker. And then their 2 stories diverge. And Ncuti Gatwa goes into the Christmas special, which I saw, where he gets a new companion named Ruby Sunday, played by Millie Gibson, and that's where it stands at this point. So again, if you haven't seen it, it's very worthwhile, and it's well written, it's well produced, it's really well acted. They have some terrific stories throughout the years, and I know you guys will enjoy it. So if you're not familiar with it, if you're not a Whovian yet, become one.